Hi everyone, welcome back to Zevo Talks. I'm John Paul Hughes, a health coach here at Zevo Health, and today we are starting a journey looking at different areas of health and fitness for all levels. We wanted to create something like this because people have a bunch of questions when getting into something new around health and well-being. So we wanted to bring in some experience and help pull the veil away from some of these well-being topics where you might have some questions. So today we are going to start with possibly the most purest of wellness topics, and that is running. So personally myself, I'm a bit of a hobbyist runner, but fortunately on our staff, we have someone with much more experience than me, and that is of course, Gareth Murran. Welcome to the podcast, Gareth.
Hi, JV. Thanks. It's great to be here. Great to talk about running.
Yeah, no, it's nice. So I know that Gareth's not one to brag about his achievements, but maybe, Gareth, you could take us through a brief history of your time in running.
Yeah, sure. So I've been running, I guess you'd call kind of semi-seriously for like probably about 13 years. I did the Dublin Marathon in 2008, just kind of on a whim. Just playing a few sports like tag rugby at the time. Someone said you're a pretty okay runner, so I just kind of trained for about 12 weeks for that time, set myself a goal in that, and kind of went and did it. And then kind of the next winter, I guess, kind of in early 2009, I decided kind of that I like this kind of running crack, so I decided to join a club. I joined Sports World Running Club, which is in Terranure in Dublin. I've been there ever since.
Yeah, brilliant. So with that kind of firepower, 13 years of experience and my couple of years experience, we're hopefully going to debunk some of the myths and answer some of the questions about people hopefully just getting into running. So maybe you've done a little bit of running in the past, maybe you've played some team sports, or maybe you haven't run ever or in a long time. We're going to address things like equipment, what you should be doing on your first session, how you should be tracking your exercise, what are the sort of things you should be focusing on, pre-rituals for before you start running, how to like structure your running in terms of doing some training. We're going to cover some beginner mistakes, and we're also going to talk about how a workplace can promote different areas of wellness like running. So the first thing I wanted to cover and start on is probably equipment. Before you run, you have to put some equipment on. You got to get changed, these things, you got to get your runner. So what should people be thinking about before they start running in terms of what equipment do they definitely need or possibly need, before they start kicking off their journey, Gareth?
Well, the most important thing you're going to need is a pair of running shoes. I'll often kind of see people will decide to go out and run in what I call kind of fashion shoes. So they'll have a pair of shoes picked up from their local, just Lifestyle or Foot Locker or something like that. And they'll start to go out for a run. And that's generally kind of seen as a bad idea. You want to get something that's actually specific to running. So what I recommend there is that you actually go into a specialty running shop and actually kind of get them to kind of have a look and get some shoes that actually suit your foot. Because if you do a small bit of kind of research online, you'll see that like a lot of people have very different types of foot. Some are wide, some are long, some are high arch, low arch, and they can just take all that kind of jargon and kind of, do a quick analysis for 5 minutes and give you the exact kind of shoe that's going to work for you. So shoes would be the main thing that I'd be encouraging people to go and get a good pair of first. You don't need to spend a fortune. You can spend, 70, 80 euro on a pair of shoes and actually get quite a good pair that will last you quite a while. And I would probably say that's the most important thing. You don't need to be going and spending a fortune on the best, Nike or Adidas kind of clothing and all that kind of stuff. Like, a t-shirt that you pick up anywhere or something that you have already is good. Obviously, if you're running in winter, you might want some reflective gear, but the actual running clothes themselves, it's not that important to be going out and buying new stuff straight away. The shoes are way more important. And then when you get into, sorry, go on. Yeah.
I was just going to say, while you're on it, like, what are the sort of shops around Dublin or the areas that that might be able to do a service like that? Where could people go to kind of start that process?
Well, I'd say there's a couple in Dublin that I know and recommend. So there's like Amphibian King, which is like a few locations. They have a good website. You can look those guys up. And there's also Run Hub, which have a few locations around town. Amphibian King being kind of in the triathlon space, but good in running, and then Run Hub, are specific for running. Elbridge is obviously a big brand that people would know as well. Some of their stores do have the gait analysis, so kind of looking at your foot and your run style and all that kind of stuff. But if you really want to get into it, say kind of go into somewhere that really focuses on running, because you'll just get the really good service from them, and they won't try and just sell you the most expensive pair of runners as well. They'll get you something that actually will work for you, which is a good important piece.
And I suppose it can be tempting for a lot of people who do a lot of online shopping just to go onto a website and try to get a good bargain. But what are some of the issues you might see if someone gets the wrong pair of runners for themselves?
The biggest thing that I'll see generally is that they'll get blisters or something on their foot because it's rubbing up there against them the wrong way in the foot. Like, it's always a good idea. And anybody that's kind of buying a pair of running shoes or walking shoes, really, for that matter, I would say you should be getting something that's half a size bigger than you would normally wear in your dress shoes, because you're just when you exercise, your limbs, your muscles, your feet get bigger. So it's just always good to have that extra room. So, when you were young, you might have had someone kind of saying, is your toe sticking out the front of that toe? And that's definitely, sticking out the front of that shoe, rather. That's definitely something you don't want in a running shoe. You want to have your toe well back, kind of, when you put them on first, and you kind of, you let your foot expand and kind of naturally move through its gait cycle. So it's important to be doing that.
And what about, I know we're in kind of a cooler climate here in Ireland, and I suppose a lot of people are going to be running throughout the whole year. And so what are the things that can do in regards to cold running, cold weather, wet weather? Like, is there specific types of clothing that people might want to look at instead of just going for a run in a cotton t-shirt and a pair of shorts?
Yeah, you'll see a lot of people doing that. And I think, like cyclists or runners, you can sometimes be aghast that people go out like in a black t-shirt and a black pair of shorts on a winter's night. So getting yourself something reflective is the most important place to start. You can pick up like reflective gear for next to nothing. You can even get them free from like Road Safety Authority and stuff like that. They don't require it to be kind of, you're wearing it over your t-shirt, so it's not going to need to be washed as many times as your actual t-shirt or your shorts might be. So it's not much hassle in that respect either. I'd say they're the kind of the essential things just to be seen when you're actually, out there on the road is the most important piece there, especially in winter. You can also as well, double up on your t-shirts. Like, if you don't mind doing a bit more washing and stuff, double up on your t-shirts and get a nice light kind of beanie and a pair of gloves. Your hat and your head are going to be the things, like if you're swimming or doing cycling, any other sport. When you're outdoors, your hat and your head and your hands are going to be the things that are most exposed and the things you want to protect. The rest of your body will warm up pretty quickly, actually, if they're covered.
Yeah, for me, that's definitely the big thing to keep warm. I wear a pair of gloves and I wear something to cover, especially my ears. It could be a headband or just a full-on kind of like tight-fitting hat are the way to go. Otherwise, it can be quite miserable. You can manage it for 2 or 3K, but then it just starts to bite into those fingers and ears. And another thing that I found useful for myself, I like to listen to music when I run, and a product that I've found really beneficial, instead of bringing your phone in your pocket, which your pockets are often quite cavernous, and the phone can kind of jump around in there, and you can have it on the arm on these kind of straps, but they're quite clumsy on them. You can get running belts, which you can get on Amazon for quite cheap, and they're like a nice material that's quite stretchy, and you can put your phone into them, and you can also fit other things. You can fit your house keys and things like that. And that's been an invaluable sort of thing that's got me through to help me out, so I can listen to music without feeling things jumping around. So for me, gloves, hat, and my little running belt is my 3 top tips for everyone out there.
Yeah, the running belts are great, actually, because I've lost track of the amount of times that I've gone out for a run and you have your earphones in, and then I've lost my house key, and then you're like, oh God, what am I going to do now? So like, the running belt is good because you can stick your phone in there, you can stick your key, you can even stick, a €10 note in there that you kind of never use unless it's an emergency, so you have it all the time as well. So it can be quite beneficial as well. Yeah. And plus, if you're going on a longer run, you could stick, some gummy bears or something in there, a bit of fuel as well. Like, if you're getting a bit more as well, which is nice. One of the things we didn't talk about as well, that you mentioned the phone there, so I think that's interesting. You can spend a lot of money when you're new to running, getting all the kind of latest gadgets and stuff, and you'll see there's all these watches from Garmin and Fitbit and all these types of things. Your phone actually does a pretty good job of recording that kind of stuff in the first instance. So no matter what type of phone you have, nowadays it'll have some basic app, be it Google Fit or Apple Health or something like that for tracking your steps. So running is exactly the same as walking in that respect. Like, so all you need is a basic step tracker, and you can start to record your activities. When you get into it a bit more, you might start downloading some of the other apps that are out there, like Strava, which is a specific community for running and cycling. But when you're beginning, like, just don't get, too bogged down in the actual numbers, and don't start looking at your phone like during the run, kind of seeing what pace you're going and all that kind of stuff. You might look at that stuff 6 months down the road when you're kind of a bit more further along in the journey, but at the start, it's much better just to kind of go really basic on that respect and just actually just go by natural kind of feel. By all means, listen to the music on your phone, once it's kind of safe to do so and all that kind of stuff, but you don't need to kind of go overly tracking everything with kind of fancy watches and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's definitely tempting to do that for a lot of people. They're so, data driven that they want to kind of track everything. But I think, learning the kind of sensations yourself first instead of the data telling you can be probably a good advantage for the first while. And I suppose we're starting to get into across this spectrum. So you've got your gear, you've got your clothing, you're all figured yourself out. So you're going to start, either you're going to have your first session or you've done a couple in the past, and you never got into it really too much. So what should people be focusing on their first couple of sessions? Like, should they just be going out the door and going, just going straight for it, do their local loop? Or is there a few tips you can give to people on how they should plan out their first couple sessions?
Yeah, so I'd say if you're totally starting out, like, and you're not, playing some other sport at the moment, then like kind of running 5K is a good target. You'll see these things like Couch to 5K and Park Run kind of advertised around the country. So 5K is kind of seen like a distance that if you train for a bit of time, you'll be able to kind of do, no matter what fitness level you're coming from. It's always a good place if you're starting kind of, from a lower base, is kind of to do a run walk kind of plan at the start. And just do it like a 50-50 split, like, run for a minute, walk for a minute, run for a minute, walk for a minute. And kind of do it that way. You'll actually be amazed how quickly the time will go. And then, what you would do then is every week, kind of once you're happy that you're progressing and you're not picking up any injuries or that kind of thing, then, you can start to change that up a bit. You might go from 1 minute walk to 1 minute run, and you might go like 90 seconds run, 1 minute walk. Or else you might decide that you want to go 2 minute run, 2 minute walk. So there's different ways that you can kind of split it up. Like, you can change the intervals and go kind of longer on each section, or else you can do a bit more running and kind of a bit less walking over time. And you can just try out the different options there. There's no kind of set rule on it. It's just kind of, depending on how you progress and that kind of stuff, it's going to feel better for you, I guess is a good way of putting it.
I think for me anyway, when I first started running, and I had a background in field sports and things like that, I was so used to just running hard all the time. When you go for your first run, you just go out the door and you have your route and you try to just do it as quickly as possible. And you finish, getting back to your house in a pool of sweat. You're absolutely dying. You couldn't take another step. Like, is that the right thing? It should be people almost be, emptying themselves out on their first couple sessions, or is there a smarter way to go about it?
It's much better off to come through stronger, than you actually you feel you can. Like, you can use that kind of, if you're going to sprint for 100 meters, kind of, you can kind of use that to kind of gauge what your fitness is. But if you do that for a kilometer and you're only making it 200 meters, then that you need to kind of maybe slow that down by like 30 or 40%, and then try and pick up towards the end. Like, it's much, much better to do it that way. And when you get into it a bit more, there's some stuff you could look up online as well in terms of using those kind of, shorter duration intervals and stuff to kind of improve a bit more as well. I think we'll get into that a bit more as well when we progress a bit kind of in the conversation a bit more.
Yeah, I suppose a good direction to take it, I suppose, how do people track those first few weeks? How do they know, if they're improving? Should they be looking at how much distance they're doing, every session or every week? Should they be timing their loops? What should people be thinking about? Or even they should be tracking how exhausted they feel in the session, after the session? What are some good ways to kind of track things over time? Or should people even be thinking about that?
I wouldn't be thinking about doing any more at the start. Then if you have a journal or a diary, like just kind of writing down how you feel after the runs, because if you don't write down how you feel, you can quite quickly find that you forget, and you might have something like, very often, like an example of an injury that runners will get when they're starting out is shin splints. So you can get pain. The shin is kind of at the front and the side of your leg, so you can get pain down those kind of areas, and over time, you may kind of forget, when did this actually start? Is it 2 weeks that I've had the problem, or 3 weeks, or did this start last week? But if you write that down, I think it can help. And then if you do end up kind of in a situation where you've done a bit too much, you've pushed it a bit too hard, if you go to see a physiotherapist, you have that information, and that'll help them, work on what exercises to kind of help you and kind of build you up. I would say that it's always good if you do start to notice any kind of little niggles or stuff, building up kind of when you start, just ease back a bit, don't go for the run the next day, kind of, just go back to walking and stuff. It's normally your body is telling you kind of that you're over, exerting yourself a bit too much. You just pushed a bit too hard. So just ease back that bit. In terms of actually kind of recording, what you're doing, then I think it's good to kind of set yourself a goal initially of running like 2 or 3 days a week. And normally the way I'd suggest people break that up is, you're probably going to start with a run walk. Most people would. You start with a minute, or you start with 2 minutes kind of on and 2 minutes off, on and off being running and walking. But depending on kind of how fit you are, you can change that up yourself. You can kind of get a good feel for it. But you can also do things like, what you can do is record what's called your RPE. So it's like your perceived exertion. So if you were to rate from like 1 to 10, how did that feel? 10 being very difficult and 1 being pretty easy. I felt like I was walking. That's just a good kind of thing to put down in your notebook as well, in terms of kind of how you felt on the day. So any little niggles kind of rank from 1 to 10, and then over time, the perceived exertion probably won't get any less. It'll probably actually get higher, but that's a good sign. You'll often get people who are new to running asking you, someone who's been running a while, when does it get easier? And it doesn't actually really get that much easier. It's just your perception of kind of, the pace that you're running gets better. Like, so you'll get faster over time as well, but you'll actually probably end up just kind of running that bit faster as well. And that's kind of what people do. So, there's not really much difference between some guy who's going to the Olympics and someone who's starting off a lot of the time, in terms of, what their body is feeling at any point in time when they're actually running. Their pace may be completely different, but, at some point in time during that run, they'll be pushing themselves quite similarly, kind of, it can be very similar. It's all about kind of building up over time, and kind of, your perception of what you're doing will improve, and you'll get faster kind of, before you even kind of start to realize that yourself. You'll just, it'll feel easier basically. I wouldn't be tracking your time per kilometer or anything like that at all at the start. If you're, still in it and still enjoying it kind of, 3 months later, then, you could start doing that, because you can actually kind of start to look at that information, and you could start to say, well, I'm going to try and, increase my pace on one of these runs, like one of the days during the week, by like 5 or 10 seconds per kilometer, and actually kind of actively try and do that. Whereas when you're starting out, it's just not worth doing that at all. I just think, you shouldn't be bothered with that kind of thing. One thing that you could do is, if you do run 3 days a week, and you've got a bit more time, like say on a Saturday or Sunday, you haven't got work to go to, you can actually, go a bit longer on that one. So say you've been doing, 15 minutes of running, 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, or something like that. So instead of 16 minutes, you could push it up to 20 or something at the weekend, because your body is probably like in a position where you're going to be kind of sitting around. You're not going to be doing quite as much. So on those quieter days during the week, it's kind of okay to add a tiny bit more volume. And that can actually give you a bit of a boost as well. Once you don't overdo it, you kind of just do it in a small way. You can kind of stick a bit more in there kind of as well by doing that.
Yeah, there's some great tips. I know from experience that shin splints specifically is a big issue that a lot of the new runners get. And I think that's one thing that if I could recommend everyone, if you do feel those shin splints coming on, that pain across your shin, just immediately try to pull it back, because it's quite quick for them to come on, and it can take a long time for them to go away. So you're better off nipping that one in the bud. So anyone that's starting running, be careful there. I guess the other thing was in regards to getting fitter over time. I think for me, the big difference when I started developing a little bit of running fitness is that over time, when you first start out, running at all paces is exhausting, essentially. You can't maintain it for too long. I think as you start to get fitter, you have the ability to run at a slow pace without getting exhausted, and you can kind of maintain that for longer periods of time. It gives you more of a range, really, of levels you can kind of run at, which can help. I think a lot of people find running miserable because you just can't run slow enough for it to not be miserable, but that does change over time. As you get fitter, you've got a higher top end, and you can run at a slower pace, and it's quite nice and enjoyable, and it's sustainable. But it does take, a couple months really to get there, would you say, Gareth?
It does, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like, there's all these different figures in psychology and kind of different walks of life for like how long it takes to kind of become somewhat proficient at something, where it kind of just becomes part of your natural kind of habit, or kind of part of your daily kind of cycle in terms of what you do. I would say kind of if you stick with it for about 2 months, you'll actually just kind of naturally get there, and you'll actually be able to kind of run consistently. The 5K that's kind of the reason I mentioned the 5K, because the programs like Coach to 5K are quite good, because they structure it in such a way that you'll be training for like 6 to 8 weeks, and then you'll actually kind of build up to running 5K consistently without stopping. And once you've kind of got the confidence boost of being able to do that, then I think there's kind of nothing stopping you after that. You can build from there. One of the worst things I see, and I discourage anyone from doing it, is setting up a goal like that they're going to run a marathon in like October, February now as we're recording this, but like trying to do that in the same year when you've not run at all is just a terrible, terrible idea. You should always start with the shorter distance. And, if you do have a longer term goal to run a marathon, which is like 42K as opposed to 5K, then, you should be looking, 18 months to 2 years out. Like, I know that might seem ridiculous, but it's the surest way to kind of, to enjoy the experience and that kind of thing. You should always be looking to the shorter distances first, because you're not going to attract as much, as many injuries. You're going to enjoy it a lot more, and you're just going to get kind of much more from it. You'll actually end up then with, running being kind of part of your life and something you enjoy, as opposed to kind of, I've done it once, kind of now I've kind of exhausted myself and I hate it now. That I see that a lot, like with people who kind of do a marathon, they force themselves to do it once, and they very often kind of don't do the proper training, and they'll end up kind of walking large parts of it and just not enjoying it at all.
Yeah. It's probably more of a badge of honor than it is, a lifestyle change.
Yeah. Whereas we want to be kind of setting people up to kind of get the benefits of running kind of on a long-term basis,
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get into the actual run. So you've planned it out. You know what you should be kind of tracking in terms of your RP and things like that. But when you're actually running, what are some things that you'd advise people to actually focus on internally and externally? What should people spend their mental capacity on?
Well, the first thing I would say is before you go out the door, like, it's good to do some stretches. You should actually be kind of just doing some. You can look up different routines, but just some lunges, some squats, putting your hands down on the ground, kind of in a push-up position, just kind of going up and down with your legs and stuff. You're basically just trying to warm your body up, because the last thing you want to do is kind of get into a run when you've been sitting at the desk all day, and just try and go out, because you're just your glutes, which your muscles, at the bottom of your back, they're basically not going to be enabled, and you want to basically kind of get them firing before you go out, because you're just going to have much more leg lift. You're going to enjoy the experience a lot more. So a small bit of that would be good before you go out. I myself run with music, so I think a good playlist is good. Nowadays, like, you can get a good pair of Bluetooth headphones for next to nothing, really. Like, you can pick up a pair for 20 or 30 euro. And I'd probably suggest that people actually kind of, start when they're running with kind of a cheaper pair of headphones, because it's quite possible they'll fall out, you'll lose them, they'll get wet, so rather than kind of using your big expensive €200-300 pair that you might have around the house, get a cheap pair for running is a good idea. And then just get a playlist that kind of motivates you. You don't want to get something that makes you run too fast, obviously, because that's quite easy to do when a fast tempo song comes on. So just bear that in mind as well. But then once you have all that set up, the things to do really are, just kind of think about your running form. Like, so you want to be, I would always say when you're running, you should be trying to, lean basically kind of with your whole body. You shouldn't be kind of leaning from just where your back kind of, upper body kind of side of things. You basically almost want to be kind of falling forward, if that makes sense. So you can imagine your whole body being kind of up like a book. It's almost like a book falling forward. The whole thing kind of falls together. It's not like, doesn't split in the middle and kind of lean forward. And you'll often see that, you can get issues, from sitting too long or from running as well, in terms of your kind of a tight lower back. And that's often because the muscles there are not strong enough. So again, it's one of the reasons to loosen that stuff up before you go out. But then if you do notice that happen while you're on your run as well, that's probably an area that you need to focus on, is kind of to improve those muscles around there and strengthen up those kind of areas. And then, it's just a case of getting out and enjoying it, I think, to be honest, because you can get out on a really kind of wet day, windy day, winter day. But once you've got the right gear, so you have your hat and your gloves on and stuff, you can still really, really enjoy it. You could be wondering why there's not more people out like running in the rain, because you're really kind of enjoying and getting a kick out of it. Rather than kind of just saying, oh, if the weather's terrible, I can't do anything this evening, that type of thing. So.
Yeah, I think there are some really good tips. Personally, and something it took me a while to learn and to focus on, is actually focusing on what you had planned to do for the day. So you might have planned to do a 30-minute walk, run, something like that. But I think especially people that have backgrounds in sport and things like that, they can often get caught up with what's going on around them. And if you're in a location, you might be running in the city center or in a town that in the evening that has quite a lot of runners, you might just get caught up in the atmosphere of people running around you. You might be doing your little 2 minutes of walk before you start running again. Someone runs past you and you're kind of sure you're fitter than them. You can just kind of get caught up in the process of running, and your ego can almost get taken over. So it's just, what I would say is, regardless of your level, do what you had planned for the day. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing. If you want to be fast down the road, you can get into races and things like that. You don't need to be fast and the fastest person, that's running around your locality every single night of the week. It really doesn't do anything positive for you, does it?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, you're not, it's like none of us are going to the Olympics. So, running in the sport is kind of like, it's a race against yourself, really. Like, it's you trying to get fitter, you trying to get better. It's almost kind of like, self-improvement, for want of a better way of kind of describing it, because it is a great way to kind of improve your overall cardiovascular kind of fitness. So I think you're not competing against anyone else. Like, you shouldn't even be thinking about kind of doing that, at the start. One other good tip, I guess, in terms of getting into the zone kind of type thing, it's great and a good thing to run with someone else. So if your partner or friend is interested in getting into running as well, or is even a tiny bit further ahead of you, further along in the journey, that can actually help a lot, because whatever way our brains work, when you're running with someone else, like, the same effort that you're putting in just seems so much easier. So you could actually like be going along by yourself and going, oh, this is painful, this is like really tough. Whereas once you're actually kind of, your brain is kind of taken off for a few minutes, you're having a chat with somebody about kind of what went on that day, it just becomes much, much easier. So you'll often see kind of, runners that are training a few years and kind of, in clubs and stuff, because it's much, much easier to run with a bunch of people than it is to kind of go out and do it by yourself. That's not to say you shouldn't start by yourself. If you want to start by yourself, it's great. It just, it can make it easier if you have someone else to kind of go and train with as well.
Yeah, I think they're great tips, and it brings us real nicely onto the idea of training. I think a lot of people have done running in the past and they do their local loop. There might be a 5K loop and they start doing it for a few weeks. And often they just feel a bit burnt out. There's no kind of variation in it. They say, I don't like running. It's boring, or I just don't enjoy it that much. Or, they might not be seeing that much progression. In regards to training and kind of structuring people's weeks, should people be focusing on anything in particular?
Yeah, I'd say you're going to be running in the same area, most people. So I'd say pick out a couple of routes. Like you can look up, there's a few different services online that you can kind of just Google kind of map a run or map a route type thing. So pick a few roads actually, and that you can kind of run on consistently. It doesn't necessarily need to be a very far distance. Like you can do loops, but do vary it up a bit. Like even just even doing the same loop on a Tuesday, say, but then going out on Thursday and doing it backwards can make the whole loop completely different, because you're going to hit any kind of hilly parts or any kind of exposed parts to the wind at different times during the run. So it can feel quite different, in terms of what you're doing. And then I would say that if you're, it's fine to do 2 if you're just starting out, but if you were doing 3, depending on the kind of plan you're following, in case of 5K, there could be 2 or 3. I'd say, if you have a bit more time, you might, go somewhere else or kind of go a different route at the weekend. You can drive up or kind of get up to one of the parks that are near you as well, which can kind of totally change the experience as well. So I think that can be good. When you're a tiny bit further along on the journey, so once you've conquered that first 5K, you can get into kind of different types of run sessions. So like you might have one, like it's kind of, a long steady run, which is, you kind of know at that point in time what your pace is. Like I'm able to run 5:30 per kilometer, like, for up to 5K. So I know that I can kind of stick to that pace. So you might go out and, you might run something like 1K at that pace, and then you might slow down by 30 seconds and you might pick it up again. So you can start to play with the different times in terms of what your targets are. And then, a good way of doing it actually is if you have a figure, say a really simple figure of like 25 minutes for the 5K, and, so that's 5 minutes per kilometer. You might start to run a small bit faster than that. You might say, okay, I'm going to go 1 kilometer at 4:30. The next one, I'm going to go back to 5:30. Then I'm going to go to 4:30. I'm going to go to 5:30. What that does is it kind of trains your systems kind of to go a bit faster than you ran up to now. And notice over time that the first 4:30 will seem quite easy, and you might even go a bit faster accidentally. You should pull back a bit, obviously. But then the 5:30 will start to feel quite slow. And over time, it just starts to kind of to kind of bring your pace up and makes you kind of run a bit faster. I would say that it's important to stick to no more than 3 runs a week at the start is plenty. Even people who I know who've been running for 3-4 years, they probably mostly don't run more than 5 times a week, because you do need the recovery. The recovery is equally important, if not more important, than the actual running itself. So if you're blocking out your week, I would find people generally don't want to do things on a Monday because you're starting off in the week, but you can either do Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and then I'd probably put the other run at the weekend. So always have that gap in between, kind of where you're giving your body that chance to recover. Doesn't mean you need to be completely sedentary on those days. You can do yoga, you can do Pilates, you could even be cycling, you could be going for a walk. Definitely good to be doing some activities, but in terms of running, when you're new, you should kind of space your week up that way. And then getting back to the point a minute ago, at the time, when you're a bit further along, you might decide that Tuesday is going to be my day where I'm just going to kind of run easy. I'm just going to go by feel. I might be tired some days I'll be feeling a bit more energetic, and that's fine. Whereas then on Thursday, I might decide I'm going to try that. I'm going to go 4:30, 5:30, 4:30, 5:30. And you can kind of map out your run that way. But I do need to stress, that's when you're a bit further along. Like at the start, you're just going to go by time. You're just going to say 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. And I'm going to kind of do 16 minutes total, and then I'm done. And I would say if you do that and you're not home, then just walk home. You don't, run the extra bit just to get home a bit quicker. Stick to the program is always kind of good.
Yeah. I think you started bringing up some paces and things like that there. And I know it's going to be completely different for everyone depending on their background or, all sorts of factors. But I guess a lot of people are just interested in what are some of the standards. And I think back in the lockdowns of 2020, a lot of people started getting into running. And I know some of the most popular searches coming out of Ireland were, what is a good 5K pace? What is a good, 10K pace? So I know it's different for everyone, but what are some of the really general things in terms of paces for something like a 5K that people might have in the back of their head?
If you're totally new to running, then you should be kind of probably trying to break about 30 minutes. If you're a bit fitter, maybe 25. If you're doing other sports already, I would add as well, though, if you're running with a partner or anything, like lads, as in kind of men, would have a fairly big advantage when it comes to running. Like they're generally, just through strength and oxygen absorption and stuff, about 12 or 13% faster than a woman would be. So just bear that in mind, that if you're running with a partner, the guy might progress a tiny bit faster than the woman would after a period of time. When you're starting off, running together, you can both be at a very similar level, but he's probably going to start to find it a bit easier, quicker than you would, assuming you're both starting from the exact same position. That's just it's not much you can do about that. It may even be, kind of cancelled out by natural ability, because we haven't spoken about that yet, obviously, as well.
Sure.
Different people are going to have different natural ability, and we need a separate podcast for that. But it can be down to a huge range of different factors, in terms of people's natural ability as well. So yeah, there's a good bit there as well. That's
great. Okay, so you say people do hit some of these numbers, things like that. I guess when people start to get interested, they're going to start thinking about, okay, is there competitions, is there races, is there clubs I can join? Could you maybe give some people a bit of a little bit of an insight into what's out there for people to get involved in?
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty. So I'd say there's a lot of running clubs. So I'm based in Dublin. There's probably 12, 15 kind of very well-known running clubs, and probably even more that I'm not aware of out there. So they're always looking for new people to join. I guess the standard that they would have is, because they have a coach and somebody's going to kind of give you advice, that kind of thing, and to really bring on your running. But the standard they would have is that you can run 5K without stopping. So it doesn't matter if you're taking 30 minutes, if you're taking 20 minutes, but you'd be able to kind of run that typically kind of without stopping. So you'd want to be kind of having done it yourself for a while and kind of done the couch to 5K, be comfortable with that. As I said, the pace doesn't matter at all. When you get into a running club, there'll be people of all sorts of abilities. Some people will kind of do it mostly for the social aspect, whereas others are kind of, the OCD kind of, very kind of intense, kind of, I want to always improve type people. It takes all sorts, but it's a great way to meet people as well. And as I say, you're always going to get the benefit then if you're going to those club training sessions of running with other people, with a range of different abilities, and you're going to improve even more from doing that and make friends and stuff, which is a great way to, through sport. It is always a good way to meet new people with kind of similar interests. There's other programs as well that you can get into. So there's Fit for Life is a thing very similar. It's kind of an Irish initiative, which is very similar to 5K. Very often that will be run by running clubs themselves, and kind of one of the coaches will be involved in that. And that's very much at a kind of couch to 5K, kind of very beginner level. There's no requirement to have ran before at all. And if you Google that kind of in your local area, I'm sure you'll kind of come up against something that's there, for you to join. There's a last one as well that I could mention, which is Meet and Train, which is linked to running clubs, but it's specifically for female runners. So it kind of gives that opportunity to kind of compete just in kind of female-only kind of races that are there. And they do a season of cross-country and a season of road races. So it gives people who are, I guess, kind of more novice, kind of entry-level kind of runners opportunity to kind of race against each other and, bring each other on and prove that way as well by competition. Rather than kind of being in kind of, I guess, open races, which can be a bit longer distance. These races kind of tend to be kind of a bit shorter distances of kind of maybe, kind of 2 up to kind of 5K. So, but all very good and kind of, come with good recommendations.
Yeah, and probably the last one that I'm aware of, and I know it's possibly a gateway into a lot of these clubs and getting yourself the confidence to do it, is the park run.
Park run is brilliant. Yeah, so park run is people don't know, it's like 5K runs that are run, every Saturday up and down the country. But fortunately, it during lockdowns and stuff, it's have to be parked and stuff. But hopefully they'll get back up and running soon enough. But the great thing about parkrun is just sign up, and then you can run not only in any parkrun in Ireland, but if you're on holidays in Spain, in America, in the UK, you can get involved in parkrun. All you do is you turn up with a barcode that you get for free when you sign up, and you show that at the very end of the race, and that records your position and your time and all that kind of stuff. And it's probably no better atmosphere at a running race than at a parkrun race. There's all sorts of levels there, from families kind of running together, people pushing strollers, to kind of to the faster runners as well that run with the clubs that might be in the local area, kind of want to take part that week. And I say it's free, which is great, and it's all recorded and photographs are taken. So a lot of them go for coffee and stuff after. So again, it's a great kind of social part of it as well.
Great. So I want to kind of shift a little bit and go into some of the mistakes possibly people make when they first started getting into running. Now, we talked about things like ego or just running too hard and things like that. But is there anything else that you would just tell people, to keep an eye on over their first couple of months getting into running, or things maybe not to even focus on at all?
Injury is probably the biggest one, to be honest. So looking for the surfaces that you're running on. It's very easy to just go straight outside your house and kind of run on the kind of nearest available kind of footpath and stuff. But if that's made out of hard concrete, then maybe it's not the best place to kind of go. You should be kind of walking a bit further and then kind of starting from there. Asphalt is probably the best kind of surface that you can run on if you're kind of limited to the roads and stuff, which is kind of the black, kind of darker surface that bike lanes are often made out of. I don't encourage running on the actual road itself, but it's made out of the same surface. But you can choose a softer surface is always going to be a good thing. I would say grass as well, but grass can be difficult to run on in winter when the evenings are dark and all that kind of stuff. But if you do have that option, then that's all the better. It's going to be much more accommodating on your body and that kind of thing. Other areas I'd say are not kind of fueling correctly and stuff, so your body does kind of need carbs and stuff to use up for exercise. So if you're on a low carb diet or stuff like that, and you're going to start up running, you might need to kind of increase your carbohydrate intake a small bit. But then on the opposite end of that as well, when you're starting out, you don't want to you need to be aware of kind of how many calories you're burning from the distance that you're doing. So, typically what you're going to be talking about is that about a mile of running is going to be about 100 calories for the average kind of person that would be out there. That'll obviously vary quite a lot by your fitness levels, your height, your weight, your age, all these different things. But you want to be sure that you're not overeating as well, because you are going to get some of the benefits there, but you could negate some of them if you're kind of eating too much as well at the same time. I would say as well that sorry, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I see that a lot, especially when you're starting out, because again, a lot of people start running very hard, and I think that intensity is often correlated with an increase in appetite. You when you run hard, your appetite starts to burn up real hard. So, and you often come home thinking you deserve, a lot of food, when in reality, just as you're saying, you've possibly burned, a lot less calories than your appetite is, telling you to go for. So just be cautious of that one, because you can a lot of people use running as a tool for weight loss, when in reality, your diet is really going to be that big driver of any kind of weight change over time, and not the running itself. So just, that's one to definitely keep an eye on.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I mean, I've heard one thing a long time ago, and it's actually that your abs are made in the kitchen. They're not made by running or any other kind of sport. By going to the gym, you've got to kind of have the two things in balance. You could argue that, if you're a recreational runner, you do have a tiny bit more flexibility, that you might not put on weight, by having that chocolate bar after lunch and stuff. But you'd also find, to counterbalance that, the people that are, more focused on training and get more into it actually become more aware of what good, healthy eating is. And actually their kind of preference kind of turns away, somewhat from the unhealthy kind of foods as well. And they start to kind of get more interested in kind of, educating themselves in those different areas and cooking more healthily and stuff as well. So that can be kind of a win-win that can kind of happen from, trying to improve and kind of look for those kind of gains, especially when you kind of get into it a bit more. And then I'd say some of the other areas that I've seen and I've done this myself a lot as well in the past is, regardless of whether it's running or whatever it is in life, you can kind of get overly focused on one particular thing. and over focused on that one goal. And I think it's always good to have balance. So I would always kind of recommend that you kind of keep a second hobby as such as well, whether that's kind of reading, maybe it's playing golf, like it could be some other sport, it could be anything at all, really, it could be photography, but you want to basically kind of have something else that if you do get injured, you're not going to see this big catastrophic thing. It's just kind of a small blip on the road, and you'll be back kind of in a few weeks, kind of when the injury is healed, when you've given it time to rest. And I see a lot of people that get really kind of they've got this one goal, or they're training for something, and then kind of they get an injury and they get really down about it, and then they often won't even get back into it. They won't start back up again. So I think that's important as well, to have that balance in your life in terms of something else that you can start out, and get into. And if you do a small injury, because I would say, like, not to discourage people, but if you're going to run for years on end, it's kind of a case of when rather than if you're going to pick up an injury. Like, none of us are, again, as I said, are Olympic athletes, so we're going to have problems with the way we run, or the style of running that we have, like, which is going to eventually attract some kind of issue, because it's a repetitive use of certain muscles and kind of stuff. So that just kind of is important to kind of bear in mind as well, to kind of have that extra kind of balance, I guess. But it's also kind of a point there just to mention on the injuries. If you do notice anything at all when you're beginning, it's another mistake, I guess, is don't wait to kind of call up the physio and stuff. Like, it's good to kind of get in there and get something solved quickly. And if you feel that you're getting quite sore, actually just taking that one day off now could actually save you like 2 weeks a bit further down the road. Because the more you run on something, and then if it keeps staying sore, it's just going to kind of make things worse. A good rule of thumb that people use in running actually is that because you learn this over time, like what's actually kind of a niggle or an injury. So if you're a bit stiff or sore, but it goes away like 5 minutes after kind of starting running, then generally it's something you can put up with, and it's fine. But if it's something that kind of stays there and kind of keeps niggling through the run, then you've got something more serious there, and you need to take a look at that, and probably need to kind of go and see a physio, or kind of do some. If you think it's a small thing, you can try and do some kind of self-massage on it and kind of see if it helps work it out. But very often, especially when you're new, you're better off getting some professional help. Yeah, no doubt. I think that consistency over time is definitely probably the big factor in, improving. Like, I think a lot of people look at running and any kind of new activity, as really short term, do it 4 weeks and they're going to run loads. But in reality, it's all about just steady growth and being nice and consistent. And if that means taking, an unplanned day off, and so your body can heal up, and that means that you're able to stay more consistent over the next 2 or 3 months, that's going to be so much more beneficial to you over the long term, It is. And I'm not going to say that, like, I get that right or everyone gets that right. I have plenty of examples where I kind of, pushed on an injury for too long and then kind of regretted it later. Like, but, giving advice to people, it's kind of always got to be the kind of way to kind of spot these things early if you can. It's always going to be better. And one thing that I might add that's been very beneficial to me is, focusing on, your recovery, but specifically your sleep. I think when you're stressing your body out with this new activity, you're going to need to focus on getting that little bit of sleep where you can recover a little bit more. I like to give people the advice that if you're running for, 30, 40 minutes in a day, maybe just give yourself that same extra allocated time to get some extra sleep. So you might get to bed half an hour earlier, or just plan your day a little bit differently so you can wake up a little bit later, because your body is going to need that extra restoration. And that's generally done during sleep. Sleep is really where we get better. It's where we recover. We're not really getting any better from the run per se. We're breaking our body down, our muscles, our aerobic system, and that's really recovered during sleep. So you need to, all that allocation that you've given to running, maybe give that extra little bit of an allocation to sleep as well. Absolutely. That's like great advice and stuff. Like, I would always advocate try and do it myself as well, that like your sleep cycles are important as well. Like, so you shouldn't really be spending 12 hours in bed on a Saturday and Sunday and then 7 or 6 on a weekday. You want to be consistent. And when you start running, actually, you get a bit more into it as well. That can be quite good as well, because you're just used to getting up at like 6 or 7 kind of. Brilliant. So the last thing, and I really wanted to drive this one a little bit myself, was around
workplace promotion and what kind of organizations could do to promote not just running, but any of these kind of well-being topics that we've explored in the past and we're going to explore in the future. But for running, per se, some things that can really help individuals is being flexible with the hours worked. If you can give your team or your organization the ability to say, okay, I might start at, 9:30 instead of 9, so I can get that run and get the shower and get a bit of food before work, that's going to be hugely beneficial. Or if you can give the ability to, go for that run at lunchtime, and maybe the person can work, 15 minutes later in the evening, or whatever it works out for that person, I think it's going to be really beneficial. Would you say that, Gareth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's much, I've not seen any research on this as such, but it's my own kind of feeling. It's much, much more enjoyable to go running during the day. Especially during winter when you've gone out, it could be wet and cold in the evenings, arguably more dangerous with the traffic and stuff but it's much more enjoyable to be going out during the day, and I think you'll get that much, you'll get that performance boost as well in the afternoon by getting the exercise in at lunchtime as well, or alternatively waking yourself up in the morning by getting the run in, early in the morning. So I think it's definitely something that companies should kind of take more advantage of, because you could arguably get more productivity from the people if they actually get to have that run at lunchtime, even if they miss 15 minutes, because they'll be much more alert than someone who just went and had a big heavy lunch and kind of did nothing and then went straight back to work, And especially with people working at home at the moment, I think it's kind of much easier for people to do that. You can be kind of ready to go almost kind of in your running gear, and just kind of really cut down on the kind of time. Whereas when you're working in an office environment, like you have to go kind of and change and have a shower and all that kind of stuff, so it can take a bit longer. Whereas when people are working at home, it can actually work really, really nicely and stuff. And plus, you're getting out at the quieter time of day, which is nice as well,
Yeah, no doubt. And I think in regards to how they can support in other ways, I'd be looking at, I know some organizations, and it completely depends on your organization, but I've seen organizations in the past have well-being allocations in regards to time. So they might say, okay, I'm going to give my team 1 hour additional well-being allocation of time, and they can use it on whatever they want. So they could go for a run during the week during, office hours, or they might say, oh, I'm going to do some yoga or meditation. And they don't have to make that time up. And yeah, as Gareth was saying, when you're giving your people, allowing them to be healthier, they're going to be more productive. Oftentimes they're going to be sick less, and they're going to enjoy their work and their time in the company a lot more. Other things I've seen is wellness bursaries. A lot of companies say, okay, here's, 250, 300, whatever amount of money per year, and you can spend it on whatever kind of thing that supports your wellness. So it might be that, Garmin watch you wanted. There might be some exercise equipment. It might be some physio sessions or a gym membership, but it supports those individuals, and it really shows that, you care about them being healthy. Other things, branded gear. If there is a bit of a culture, or you wanted to get a bit of a culture, a lot of organizations will, get some t-shirts with their, the company branding on it, things like that, which can just, again, show the individuals in the company that, you care about them and you support them. And then finally, sorry, Gareth, jump in there on any of them.
No, that's good. I was just going to kind of say with the branded gear and stuff, I was just thinking back to a place I used to work before, where actually when you're a bit further along and you kind of get more experience at running, it can actually be a great way to kind of to become better friends, I guess, with some of your colleagues and stuff, because you can kind of bring them on the journey that you've been on, and you can actually kind of get involved and kind of give them some advice in terms of how they can start out, and that can be really kind of not just encouraging for you, but it can also bring great satisfaction, I guess, to kind of just to help people along kind of in terms of kind of their running journey like that as well. And giving them the advice in terms of kind of some of the things that you might have kind of done wrong when you started out as well. So that could be really good. There's also with regard to kind of clubs and stuff. There's a lot of people out there now actually that have different expertise in running, and I think some of them, I don't know the names per se, but there's a lot of people that would do coaching and stuff on a corporate kind of level. So they'll actually come in, like you'd have kind of a physio, or like you'd have a Pilates class at lunchtime, and they'll actually do kind of a running technique workshop in the company. So I think that can be quite good as well. Like, and they can bring groups out on runs as well, and kind of give them some advice on on their form and stuff, like, because that is kind of they are the things that people start to think about kind of when they're a bit further along. It's like, is my running form good, and kind of can I make improvements there? You know, and kind of what exercises could I do to build some strength or to kind of to loosen out some of my muscles and that kind of stuff. So I think companies can definitely boost that by, you know, bringing someone in to kind of to give a kind of a lecture, kind of help along the run club a bit. But it's also just a really good way to meet more of your colleagues and kind of get out kind of in a formal kind of thing. And it's a great leveler as well, because you'll often find when these things exist that you'll have someone on the management team out there with someone who's just in the door as well, like, you know. And the person who's just in the door, you know, could be a lot younger and, you know, much faster and stuff. So I think that can be a great way for people to socialize as well and that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, and companies spend so much time thinking about social connection and how to improve teamwork and stuff. And there's nothing that bonds people like misery and working hard together and kind of breaking themselves down. It really connects people. And a lot of people know that from being in sports teams growing up, and you're very connected to these people. And it's a great way in an organization, if you can get people to kind of suffer for the greater good together and something like this, it really bonds everyone together. So that small investment that you might be considering is probably worth it so much more than a lot of other things you might think that, you know, is more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
So another thing there as well that I'd say is, you know, drinking a lot more water. So when you're brand new to running or any sport, you're going to be sweating a lot more. You're going to be kind of burning a lot more energy. So running in particular does kind of, you know, you get quite hot very quickly. So you're going to be drinking a lot more water. You're going to need to drink a lot more water. So I'd be definitely kind of, you know, recommending that you're kind of, you know, making sure that you hit those kind of recommended daily amounts. And I think you're just going to naturally kind of, you know, seek that out. And that's absolutely fine to do it. But it's also going to improve your running as well, because there's a lot of studies done that kind of show that, you know, if you're not hydrated going into your running, that the perceived exertion is going to be way higher. So it's important that you actually go in hydrated as well. It's as important as fuel, if not more important, just in terms of how you actually feel kind of when you're starting out.
Yeah, I think that's especially relevant. Possibly, you know, people often ask, you know, what should I be eating or drinking before or after or during? And I think for most people, you know, if you're running for under an hour, which I presume most people will be, if you're kind of starting off, you're mostly going to be 30 minutes. You just need to have a nice meal beforehand, a couple hours before, some kind of fuel just to kind of, you know, get you perked up. That might just be a bit of fruit or something, an hour before. And you just need a good hydration status, so a bit of water. You don't need, I don't think, to be excessively thinking about staying hydrated during your run and bringing a bottle with you. Usually you'll have enough kind of water on board if you've hydrated before to get through that. Yeah, for sure, once you finish up, then start rehydrating again. But I don't think for those shorter, under an hour sessions, I don't think you need to excessively be thinking about too much hydration in the session or too much kind of fueling in the session. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Like most of the kind of research I've seen in my own experience, kind of running marathons and stuff, like you can do about 2 hours, like without kind of requiring much more fuel or water, to be honest. Like unless it's a really hot day in the middle of summer, then you might change that up, because like being in Ireland where I am, you just wouldn't be used to that. But in general circumstances, yeah, that'd be absolutely fine to go with, you know. It'd be grand.
Perfect.
Canadian guy, and I just think it does a really good job of actually kind of explaining kind of the different types of workouts that you could be doing when you're starting out running, but also giving the exercises and stretches that are specific to running. So there's no point in going into the gym and lifting a load of weights if, you know, you're trying to get leaner for running, you know. So I think this book just does a really good job of actually kind of, you know, giving you a program that's specific to running and is actually going to make you a better runner, and making it very easy to understand as well. So it's Science of Running by a guy called Chris Napier. And I just picked this up on Amazon. It was a recommendation from a friend a couple of years ago, and I think it's a really good one to read. It's not a book you'd read back to front. It's kind of a book you dip into different sections on, but it's only, I think it was only like 12-15 euro. So really, really good buy to get. And no matter what level you're at, I'd say actually it's a good one to pick up.
Okay, well, Gareth, thanks so much for joining me today. I think Everyone's going to get a lot of tips. Hopefully you're able to absorb most of them. And hopefully that's given you either some motivation to get out and try, or at least, you know, when you are ready, you're going to have some of those tools to really help support you. So yeah, thanks again. And I look forward to talking to you guys on our next podcast. So thanks, everybody.